Hello and welcome to the Learning Love Podcast. I'm Dr. Mark A. Hicks, author of the book Learning Love. It is possible to build the healthy, happy, thriving relationships you have always wanted. So let's spend some time learning love. Love is the answer. Now all we have to do is explore all the questions. And today's question is, what do you do when you feel lonely in your relationships? If you feel lonely, even though you might be married or have a romantic partner, a committed relationship of some kind, even if you have family, children, parents, siblings that you're close to, you may have friends, you have coworkers that you get along with and feel good about and maybe even consider them friends. You go out sometimes with your coworkers for lunch. You might meet some friends at the pub or the coffee shop after work. You go out with your family on the weekends. You do all the stuff with the people around you, and yet you feel lonely. That's not to mention all the people you know in social media. You're liking their posts, they're liking yours, you're making comments back and forth, and you feel like you know these people and that they know something about you because you're posting your life online. You're putting the things of life on social media and people are interacting with it. And so we know a lot of people, we have a lot of contact, and yet some people feel very lonely in the midst of that. And let me say, it's not actually some people. It's a lot of people. If you feel like that, you are not alone in feeling lonely. There are a lot of people that feel that way. In 2023, the Surgeon General of the United States put out a report talking about the epidemic of loneliness, and that was his term, the epidemic of loneliness. He called it a public health crisis. In the United States, we are in a public health crisis because of this epidemic of loneliness. We have relationships. We know people. We are going through all the stuff of living in relationships in proximity to people, and yet inside, in our minds, our hearts, in our spirit, we feel lonely. And it is an epidemic that is not only prevalent in our country, but it is a public health crisis because loneliness leads to really damaging things. It can lead to things like depression, anxiety. It can even lead to thoughts of suicide for some people. Even though they have people around them, we are feeling more and more lonely in our society. And so today I want to talk about what we can do about that, what the causes are, why has that come about, at least in part. We don't have the opportunity here to talk about every conceivable reason, but talk about some of the big ones and talk about what we can do about that. And if you've listened to me before, you're going to know one thing I'm going to say. Get help. This is nothing to be trifled with. If you are feeling chronically lonely, get help. Because I'm going to talk about some things that can cause this, but every story is unique. Every individual has their own unique path that has brought you to this point. And so find a therapist, find a counselor, a coach, some professional. As I always say, if you were sick, you'd go to a doctor. If you had a toothache, you'd go to a dentist. If your car was acting up, you'd go to a mechanic. Why would we do anything else than find professional help when we are feeling chronic loneliness, depression, anxiety, things that can be treated, can be helped, but desperately affect our life in negative ways if it goes untreated, if we don't address this. And so don't just suffer through it, get help. But today, we're going to talk about some things that cause this and some things that you can do in addition to getting help with this to take care of yourself in such a way that we can get past this loneliness epidemic that has gripped our country and it's caused such a public health crisis. So if you are in this place, let's understand the difference between solitude and loneliness. I said a minute ago that we feel lonely even if we're in a crowd, but some people aren't in a crowd. If you've been through a divorce, if people in your life have passed away or somehow have moved away from your life for some reason, if you have moved to a new state or a new country and you are feeling very disconnected from the people in your life, solitude and loneliness are not the same thing. It is possible to be alone and not feel lonely. If you are in a good place emotionally, if you are in a good place mentally, solitude is not necessarily going to be harmful to you. Now, almost everyone is going to suffer at some point if you are in solitude for too long, but stretches of that are not bad. It can be a time to recharge, especially if you're an introvert. It can be a time to sort of think through some things. It can be a time to get a few things done that you wanted to get done without being interrupted. It can be a time to read or to do something that you really enjoy without being interrupted or wondering if you're taking time away from someone else. Spiritual people might do things like pray or meditate and get in touch with the spiritual side of life. And so solitude is not necessarily a bad thing. In fact, everyone should practice a little bit of it. Introverts will need more than extroverts, but everyone should sort of get away and practice at least a little bit of time in solitude when you can. If you have small children, that might be next to impossible, but do the best you can to have just a moment of solitude where you kind of regroup, take a deep breath, and have a little time for yourself. That's different than being lonely. Loneliness doesn't matter whether you are alone or in a crowd. It is an emotional state. It's not about the people that are around you or even the quality of people around you. It is an emotional state you are in. And there's some causes for that. One of them is if you have been through trauma, if you have been through some tragedy in your life, it is very common for people to emerge from that in a state of feeling lonely. One of the reasons is we don't want to get hurt. And if we've been hurt before, we know how fragile life is. We know how vulnerable we are, and we want to protect ourselves. And so it's very common, if you've been through some sort of tragedy or hardship in your life, to put up those barriers, those walls, to put up your defenses, keep people at arm's length, be very cautious being close to people, kind of watch for the danger that might be out in the world, watch for the danger that might come from other people, even people you love, that might hurt you, and to put up those emotional walls. When we do that, we are building our own emotional prison. And so if we're trying to protect ourselves from getting hurt because we've been down that road before, we've been hurt before, and it doesn't have to be some great tragedy in the scheme of life, okay? Obviously, if you have lost a parent when you were a child, if you have been abused in some way, if you've been through an abusive relationship, if you have had some tragedy in your life, then yes, that is something that can cause you to be very leery and want to put up those emotional walls. But it can be smaller things. It can be something that happened to you when you were in a vulnerable state of life, something that happened when you just didn't feel your best. Somebody said something that really hurt you. And in the scheme of things, maybe it's not that big. Maybe you lost a job. And even though you went and got another job, maybe even a better job, the trauma of losing that job, even though you may not even like that job, maybe it's something you didn't want to do to start with, and maybe you found something better. And so everybody thinks, well, it's happy ending. So everybody thinks, yeah, there's a happy ending there and not a big deal, but it might have been a big deal to you at the time. And it can cause emotional trauma if you were really hurt by the idea that you lost that job. And so if we've had that kind of grief in our life and we haven't processed through that in a healthy way, it's going to be easy to put up those barriers, those walls, and build your own emotional prison. When we do that, you are going to feel lonely. It's going to be a lonely life trying to always protect yourself. The cure for that is learn to be vulnerable. We have to grieve through the hurts of life. We have to learn to grieve. It's not fun. It's not easy. And again, it does require professional help sometimes to get through those grief processes. But grief is a very healthy thing. And it brings us to a place of acceptance eventually so that we can go on to a good, healthy, happy life despite the tragedies. One of the things that I always say, I've said it many times, I have this quote in my book, and I will always say it. Some things in life, they're so painful, it's like it leaves a hole in your heart. But you can live a really good life with a hole in your heart. And if you start to understand that, you can come back from the difficulties of life. If you have that hole in your heart, understand some things aren't going to heal. If you've lost a loved one, if you've been through some trauma in your life, you will have emotional scars. You may have that hole in your heart, but you can live a really good life with a hole in your heart. Think about it like this. If you lost your arm in an accident, life's never going to be the same. Your arm's not growing back. But there are a lot of people who live a great life even after that trauma. It's not the same. They have to learn new skills. They have to get some help. They have to go through physical therapy. A lot of goes into it, but you can live a really good life without that arm. The same is true emotionally. When we've been through trauma, the answer is not to perpetually protect ourselves. The answer is to grieve through that, come to a place where we know I can live a really good life even with that hole in my heart. Even though I have emotional scars like everyone else, we all have them, I can go on to live a good life, a happy life, and still be vulnerable enough to put myself out there and connect with other people. Knowing that, yes, sometimes we'll get hurt in life, but that is a better risk than building our own emotional prison. And it is a way to overcome that loneliness when we grieve the hurt of life and come back. Let that be our comeback story in order to build happy, healthy relationships again, because we're willing to step out, take the risk, and be vulnerable. That's not a blind risk. We have to learn the warning signs of dysfunctional and abusive people. We learn the warning signs of toxic relationships, and we avoid those. We set boundaries, but we don't keep everyone out. We let people into our life and connect with them because we've grieved through those tough times and can come back into that good life. Another reason that people experience such loneliness is they have rejected themselves. There's this place in life we call the teenage years that are quite turbulent. We don't know who we are, but we really want to. We want to have our own identity. We want to build our own bridges to our future. And we start pulling away from our parents. We go through this rebellious stuff. We very much need to gravitate to a friend group that we can find an identity and all these things that happen in the teenage years. And then we get into our adult years. Very often we've resolved none of that, and we just sort of move on. Many people have rejected themselves, don't feel good about themselves, don't really know who they are kind of wandering aimlessly with no real point to their life, not really understanding who they are as a person and what they want and the kind of things that make you love yourself. They don't really have that, and they just kind of move on. We go to college or trade school, we learn a job of some kind, we start making money, we buy a house, we find someone, get married, have kids. We do the stuff of life when we've never really identified who we are. We've never really taken the time to appreciate ourselves. We rejected the whole idea in our teenage years of all the stuff we'd been told by our parents, all the stuff we've been told by adults, and we were going to find our own way. And that's a pretty healthy thing to go through. It's traumatic, but it's a healthy thing to go through if we come out on the other side figuring that out. A lot of people haven't. We've never really taken the time to understand what we appreciate about ourselves. We just sort of move on in life and just do what we're supposed to do. Just do the stuff of life. And then we wonder, why is this not working? There are so many people that come to a place in their life when they have the job, they've gotten the promotion, they've got the house, they have the spouse and the kids, and they've got the stuff of their life, and they wonder, is this it? And they feel very lonely in the midst of all of that. And that's because they never really knew who they were. They never really took the time to appreciate and to love themselves. I write about this in my book. A lot of people have written about this and talked about it. Brene Brown is famous for talking about this. You cannot love other people unless you love yourself first. It's impossible. It may seem like you can. You can have some emotional attachments to people, but you cannot really love other people, connect with other people, unless you love yourself first. Love is organic. It has to be grown within. You can't get it because someone else loved you. You can't just take their love and adopt it for yourself. It has to be grown within you. So many people are looking to build these relationships with friends, with family, with a spouse, with their kids, with coworkers, thinking that if these people love me, it will validate me, and then I will feel good about myself. That's not the way it works. Sounds logical, doesn't work that way. And so we have to learn to love ourselves first. And one of the reasons we feel so lonely is we don't really love ourselves. And so no amount of love from the outside, no amount of attention, no amount of validation that comes toward us from the outside is ever enough unless we love ourselves. The loneliness very often comes because we've not paid attention to who we really are and learning to appreciate that, learning us, learning ourselves, appreciating that, learning to love ourselves despite our flaws. We're not perfect, but despite our flaws, we learn to love who we are so that we can learn to love others. You cannot love other people more than you love yourself. So if you want to have those healthy, thriving relationships, learn to love yourself first. If you want to learn to overcome loneliness, even in a crowd, learn to love yourself. Again, if you have no idea where to start on that and you think, how in the world do I do that? Get help. Don't just try to wing it. Get help for that. Find the things that you love about yourself. The more you love yourself, the more that you can love other people. Another thing that we need to understand about loneliness is that superficial relationships will not overcome loneliness. We've gotten really good at this one in our society. We've built a lot of superficial relationships. We keep people at arm's length and we just sort of have acquaintances we call friends. We interact with people on social media, and very often we have a superficial relationship even with our spouse or our romantic partner, people we live with. Sometimes we go to work, we come home, we do chores, we help the kids with the homework, we fight the battles with the kids to get them in bed, we maybe crash in front of the television for half an hour before we have to go to sleep and get up in the morning and do it all over again. And you do that for months and years, and sometimes you end up with a very superficial relationship, even with the person you care about most, even with the person you're married to. If you're just doing the stuff of life and going through the motions and going through the obligations and never really connecting, you may be doing all the stuff right, but it becomes a superficial relationship. If you have acquaintances that you call friends, but you never really connect with them, you never really have any sort of bond with them. If you go through the motions at work and you are doing the stuff that makes you successful at work, but you're never connecting with people, you're never building relationships, it starts to feel very lonely. And in our society, superficial relationships have kind of become the norm. And so you can look at your life and think, well, I'm doing everything right. I'm doing what everybody else does. Doing what everybody else does doesn't make it right. A lot of times people are not doing things correctly. Superficial relationships will never overcome loneliness. Finding more superficial relationships and finding more people to put around you will never allow you to have the kind of connections that overcome loneliness. And so we're back to learning to be vulnerable, learning to put yourself out there wisely, like again, learning to recognize abusers, set boundaries with people that will hurt you, but not everybody's going to hurt you. Not everybody's an abuser. Find the people in your life that you can build trust with and open up and allow them to open up to you and build some connections. Superficial relationships only lead to loneliness. Real, authentic connections are the way to overcome the loneliness of life, and especially look to connect with the people that are closest to you, your spouse, your family, your closest friends. Make that a priority, to not allow that to be a superficial relationship where you're just going through the motions of life, but that you are actually building an authentic connection. When you do that, it doesn't take many authentic connections to overcome loneliness. You don't have to have hundreds of authentic connections. You just need a few to overcome the loneliness of life. And so make sure you are making a priority to overcome the trauma that happens in life. Grieve your way through it. Get help for that so that you're not putting up emotional walls that build your own emotional prison. So you can come back from the tragedies of life, from the hurts of life, and make connections. Make sure you are loving yourself, because you can't love other people unless you love yourself first. You can't build those real connections unless you love yourself first. And make sure you don't fall into our societal trap of building our life around superficial relationships, thinking I have lots of people around and never really having an authentic connection. That's not going to work. Make sure you have at least a few people that you are working to build a real authentic connection of friendship and family and relationship. If you do these things, you can start to overcome those feelings of loneliness. Again, get help. Chronic loneliness is not something superficial or trivial. It is a real epidemic of loneliness that's leading to a public health crisis. So get help for that. And do these things to overcome this epidemic. Making sure you love yourself, making sure you have authentic connections, making sure you overcome the hardships of life through grief. And when you do these things, you can build real relationships and put loneliness out of your life, because you have real relationships that matter, healthy relationships that last. And that's what we all need. So that's my thoughts today on how you can build the kind of life, love, and relationships that you want in your life. As always, I hope you'll go to my website, markahicks.com. There's a lot of things there, including easy links to my book. You can purchase that now. Learning Love, Building a Life That Matters, and Healthy Relationships That Last. It will help you build the kind of relationships that you want, need, and deserve in your life. I want to thank my producer, Abby Graves of Abby Graves Production, and I want to thank all of you for listening today. Until next week, love well, everyone.